Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here for the last panel. My name is Shen, and I'm the partner in AnJie Broad Law Firm. My major practice area are regulatory compliance in TMT and the data protection. I noticed actually most of our panelists have both law firm and in-house working experience. So believe they can share their observation from both angles. I'll just quickly introduce the panelist. Adam All, he's a fellow of Institute of Big Data Governance. Adam has over 15 years experience in corporate law, regulatory compliance, data privacy, M&A, privacy equity, and capital market transactions. The second speaker is Aaron Bleasdale, and he's a managing associate GC, head of Asia Pacific Data Legal, HSBC. Aaron has extensive experience in data protection and privacy. He plays an important role in assisting financial institutions in navigating the complex landscape of data security. Our third speaker is Julia Mack. Julia is leading the Asia Pacific regional effort in privacy governance and compliance at Armour. Previously, she worked at a Chinese tech MNC and Baker McKenzie Hong Kong. Our next panelist is Mr. Yingjing. Mr. Wu is currently in charge of the privacy protection work for the technology platform business group in AnGroup. And his work mainly include cloud service, AI, distributed database, and blockchain. Before joining AnGroup, he served as Zhonglun Law Firm. Our last panelist is my law firm peer, Dora, and she's a partner, and her practice covers almost all the aspects of IP protection and enforcement. Additionally, she also advises on China-related data privacy, including the hot topic in China recently, cross-border transfer. Okay, so just now, the panelists in last panel, they share a lot in the tech industries. And most of our panelists in this panel come from traditional industries. So when traditional industry meet AI, what kind of chemical reaction will trigger? So without any further ado, let's start it. So please, Adam.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. Now, about innovation in healthcare. Imagine a world. The year, well, let's say 2050. You're resting on an examination table as a robot doctor wheels into the room. Its gleaming white chassis and mechanical arms give it an almost human-like appearance. It says to you, "Good morning, sir. I'm your doctor. I'm your medical assistant today." The robot announced in such a soothing synthetic voice. Its eyes, really just cameras and scanners and sensors, focus on you as its advanced AI processor process your medical history and vitals. The doctor moves with uncanny fluidity, directing its scanner glide over your torso, and lasers map your internal anatomy, detecting even the subtlest abnormalities instantly. Then it says, "Diagnosis complete. There are 2 defects. It's in your cardiovascular system. Please hold still for your personalized treatment plan." Now, with precision impossible to be mimicked for a human, the robot aligns its injector arm and administers gene therapy to you, tailored for your DNA. Nanobots course through your veins, repairing damage at the cellular level. Then it confirms your recovery. Its bedside manner, it's flawless. Though it might just be projecting empathy according to its programming. As you leave, you pass through rows of robots tending to patients. The AI allows them to work tirelessly without errors and variability of human doctors. This technology could save countless lives, but you start asking yourself, at what cost? You can't help but miss the human interaction that has been lost. Does that sound familiar? Does that seem like an experience that we all share at hospital today? Probably not. Now, that was not an opening of any sci-fi novel. That actually is my failed attempt at writing one. Now, let me dial back a little bit on the sci-fi imaginings and keep our discussion more down to earth. What's more likely is that AI will play a role in all of these and maybe some of these scenarios. For example, patients would likely interact with an AI bot through a phone or a website. They would ask you questions about symptoms and medical history and concerns. You could describe your health issues and issues in your own words instead of using predefined clicks and menus. They will be able to use natural, free-flowing dialogue with the users to gather the needed information about their conditions. This conversational approach makes sharing information with the AI bot easy and intuitive. Secondly, perhaps a little bit more realistic is the fact that it could access your patient full medical records and lab results with your consent. It could comprehensively analyze your client data with your reported information to come up with possible diagnosis and treatment options. They could cross-reference the symptoms and issues reported by the patient with your similar medical history, medications, test results, and other imaging data to provide a more accurate, evidence-based assessment. With such a holistic view of your patient's health data from their providers, it would allow the AI to connect dots that could be missed by individual physicians and only seeing a subset of information. This enables the bot to harness the full power of available data to derive deeper clinical insights and more personalized diagnosis to each patient. They could also be using natural language processing and sentiment analysis. They could converse with patients in a natural, empathetic way, gather information, all the needed information. They could also perhaps comprehend complex health concerns expressed in a free-form speech or text rather than pre-programmed keywords. Sophisticated dialogue models allow them to have a more natural back and forth conversations with patients. They could ask clarifying follow-up questions with you. And sentiment analysis also allow the doctor to recognize emotions like anxiety, frustration, allowing it to adjust its language, just like a human, to be a little bit more empathetic to improve the patient's experience. This human-like conversation ability could enable the patient to transparently share all the relevant needed information. And that could be one use of AI as well. And once they determine the likely diagnosis, it could prescribe, like I said, medications, order tests, and refer the patients to specialists if need be. Now, for routine illnesses and preventive care, patients in the future may never need to see a human doctors ever again. They could provide quick, convenient access to personalized medical service and treatment. Now, human doctors will be able to focus more on complex cases and procedures, whereas AI doctors can handle frontline medical care as well as medical triage for the majority of the patients. It can minimize costs and enhance efficiency. That's obviously another benefits of AI. It could provide medical care and to underserved communities by being available 24/7 online at low cost. The AI bot can be accessed 24/7 through your smartphone, public computers, community health centers in remote areas. This on-demand access had little to no cost increase because they're digital and they can handle large patient volumes easily. It will help to address the physician shortages in certain regions, for example, and it could configure multilingual capabilities to serve diverse populations. So these are things that could potentially happen in the future, or maybe has already been in place in certain areas. Now, talking about the benefits, I want to go into the benefits before we talk about data protection. Like I mentioned, disease diagnosis, it could analyze medical images and data to identify diseases and defects. This allows for faster and more accurate diagnosis and treatment. Treatment recommendations. It can analyze patient data like genetics, lab results, and medical history, prior treatments to predict the most optimal medications and dosages personalized for each individual patient. The vast amount of data from medical research can be put into good use. It allows them to identify connections and patterns that enable truly individualized medicine. For example, they could look at a patient's particular genetics to determine how they will metabolize different drugs based on enzyme activities inferred from their genome. It can go beyond certain genotypes to consider the phenotypes, phenotypic vectors, for example, as well as their weight, their kidney, liver function, and other medications, their diet, and so on and so forth. This AI could enable ultra-precise treatment that is tailored for their unique biology and lifestyle for maximum effectiveness with minimum side effects. It has that sort of in-depth, multi-factor understanding of each patient, allowing it to provide better informed and evidence-based treatment, not being able to accomplished by any human doctors. It will be highly customized to that particular individuals. So we talk about the 24/7, so it will be able to help with minimizing cost, enhancing efficiency with 24/7 unlimited access. It could also help to promulgate population health management. It can analyze population data to identify high-risk groups, for example, predict outcomes, and guide preventive interventions on a large scale. And it could I also here talk about mental health support. It could be used for mental health triaging, counseling, and monitoring and treatment recommendations. These will expand access to mental health care. Now, the challenges of AI in healthcare in particular, I did not mention it here, but one of the issue has to do with insufficient anonymization technique. With sufficient cost and computation power, re-identification, it's highly probable. There's an issue of data limitations. Such algorithms rely on being able to access to large, high-quality representative data sets in order to train accurate models. However, there's always a prevalent limitation on medical data availability, access restrictions, and lack of interoperability and unwillingness to share data across institutions that could severely constrain development of effective AI tools. Data silos are very common in healthcare. Privacy regulations rightfully limit the sharing of patient data, but this also fragments data pools. Useful data can be locked away across various clinics, hospitals, clinical trials, and research studies. If technology companies cannot access sufficiently large and diverse training materials, then it will compromise their effectiveness, and AI development will hit significant roadblocks. Even large academic medical centers may lack comprehensive data needed to train AI with. Breaching such data gaps through secure sharing frameworks and centralized repositories of de-identified data could help drive better AI development. But we're dealing with a relatively proprietary mindset in healthcare in general that currently limit the data samples available, hindering the advancements of healthcare absent a more open and yet ethical data sharing practices. I do also want to talk about biased data. The data used to train the AI models could potentially lead to biased data, which is related to the fact that there is a data limitations. If the data that has been used to train the AI model reflects societal biases, for example, skewed data collection practices or a lack of diversity could lead to biased results and exacerbates healthcare disparities. For example, if a data set skew heavily towards male, white, middle upper class due to unbalanced recruitment into clinical trials and studies, the algorithms trained on such data will not generalize and sampling biases, and it will not generalize to catered for the underrepresented patient populations. Unfortunately, historic exclusions and sampling biases are often baked into medical research. And data gets propagated into AI models, resulting in things like poor performance and diagnosing diseases in certain particular ethnicities. So unless we're able to proactively address through representative data collections and sampling techniques, biased data could create AI system that worsen inequitable outcomes. So how to carefully curate an unbiased, diverse training data is crucial, but it's incredibly challenging. In expanding the inclusion criteria and demographic representation in studies to assemble could lessen the biased data set, but it will be a very important step towards fairer AI. Now, it goes without saying that there's obviously privacy concerns as well. The use of patient data raises concerns about privacy, confidentiality, and informed consent that must be addressed. Patients may not be aware that their data is being used to develop AI systems. Their lack of opportunities to give informed consent about these specific data could be problematic. And sometimes consent is buried in generic terms and conditions. This violates the principles of transparency and patient autonomy. I also talked about a little bit about de-identification's inadequacies. So data set sometimes are de-identified by removing obvious identifiers. Re-identification is still possible, and that would lead to violations, and it's an issue that must be if it falls into the wrong hands, it could lead to catastrophic results. Now, to demonstrate some of the challenges let me use my remaining time to practice one more time my amateur sci-fi writing. One more time, just indulge me for a little bit. No, so imagine a large hospital system. It's partnering with a tech company to develop an AI system to predict patients' risk of hospital readmission. So high risk, patients can be targeted for preventive interventions. That seems quite likely. The hospital provides the tech company with a data set of thousands of patient records, including demographics, diagnosis, treatments, outcomes, and costs. Now, the data is quote unquote de-identified by removing obvious identifiers like names and Hong Kong ID numbers. However, the hospital did not explicitly obtain patient consent for this kind of data sharing, and they are unaware that they may be used this way. So the tech company utilized this records to train a predictive AI system, but the data itself has inherent biases and gaps and underrepresentation from low-income minority elderly populations. And once deployed, it became evident that such AI model is less accurate for these underrepresented groups, leading to insufficient interventions. Now, when you ask this tech company what happened, the short answer is, this is proprietary trade secrets, and they walk away. So this is not an unthinkable scenario. With the use of AI, data protections is at the paramount of hospital, not just hospital authorities, but any healthcare innovators. From that scenario that I just depict, I could at least identify 4 different issues: lack of consent, lack of transparency, the anonymization techniques is not foolproof, and the AI system perpetuating biases if data is not representative of diverse populations. So I guess to wrap up my presentation, what I'm trying to say, instead of talking about how evil corporations can be, but this is not the point that I'm trying to make. There are lots of innovators who are trying to bring about innovative measures that could help develop healthcare. We're all, for majority of us, who have experienced the challenges of our healthcare system, at least in Hong Kong. Our innovations will no doubt bring about the benefits that could benefit our populations. So do ignore my knee-jerk villainization of the healthcare AI sector, but do bear in mind some of the recommendations will be to create a more robust data governance framework, to evaluate the de-identification and anonymization techniques, to have a very comprehensive cybersecurity strategies, limit access to patient data, it goes without saying, and to have a very robust proper consent protocols. And the other ones, such as strong data protection regulations and privacy ethics advisory boards, and other techniques that could help protect data within the hospitals and the clinics, or any organizations in which patient data is housed, will be beneficial. All of these combined, put together, might not adequately protect data from leaking from the system, but it would at least provide that sort of a comfort to the patients in the long run, and it will be beneficial to the development of innovations in healthcare. I guess that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. So no wonder Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos also mentioned that healthcare is one of the industry that will be elevated by machine learning and AI. Given that Adam described a very fascinating scenario with the AI doctor, and we would like to offer a special treatment. So if you guys have any question, you can ask them now.
Hi, thank you, Adam. My name is Hai Hao from MIT. I just wanted to ask, are you familiar with the field of affective community pioneered in the 90s by MIT professor Rosalind Picard? And if so, how is it being applied to mitigate and or realize that sci-fi scenario with the robo doctor, in your intro? And on a little more general note, do any of the, I guess, I was expecting to ask this at the end. So, but do you think the prohibitions against AI emotion detection, which would feature in such a AI, robo doctor scenario, the prohibition against AI emotion detection, like in the new EU AI Act, could that hinder research and development in that area? Thank you.
Thank you. From fellow MIT alum. I've actually not heard of about that paper that you mentioned. Oh yeah, here's a whole field. I'm not familiar with that myself. But in terms of hindrance, I think yes, for sure. I think that there's a definite benefit for having that sort of sentiment analysis baked into AI system that would assist. The one, based on my professional experience, I'm not a physician or doctor myself, even though I worked in the industry, is that doctors are humans as well. They do overwork, and that could prejudice their analysis and the outcome, which will in turn impact the outcome of the patients. So I do agree. I think it will be a hindrance if we were not able to allow that analysis. I hope that answers your question. But I will look into the field that you mentioned in the 90s. Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Great presentation, Adam. Very lively. Ranyu, just a quick question. With regards to the challenges of AI, you have 9 points up there. Where does robotics fit in? Because you would have AI training robotics, surgical robotic systems, potentially.
Sure. I think in one of the, well, there are many challenges, but the one thing, again, from my professional experience, it isn't so much about on a technological front. The resistance actually comes from both the patients and the physician themselves. You'll be surprised to learn that, well, I don't think we should be surprised, is that there is a huge inertia within the medical healthcare industry to resist change. It does not necessarily has to do with the fear of displacement of jobs, but it has to do with the liability. In fact, every single practicing physician in Hong Kong must have a malpractice insurance. The reason being that they're worried about liability. The issue with the robotic involvement, again, has to do with the fact that I think also patients themselves might not trust a digitalized intervention. In Hong Kong, as we know, private hospitals are incredibly expensive. If you pay a certain amount, you expect to be treated by a certain individual. If we allow the intervention of a more robotic involvement, then what would that do to the livelihood of those who rely on their skills, their personalized skills to make a living? And for patients, I simply, how could I define if anything goes wrong, whether or not I should go after, you can go after a doctor, but you can't, I guess you still can go after a hospital that employs this technology, but the complications of this makes a lot of patients incredibly sensitive to the use of that. I think what's likely going to happen is that it's an augmentation. Any sort of robotic intervention would be an augmentation to human doctors. I don't think we'll see a dystopian world where we will be treated as depicted in my a lousy sci-fi novel opening, that will be treated by a robot doctor. Not yet. In the near future, I could see that it will help and assist human doctors in operating on patients in need, and it will alleviate a lot of their workload.
Do we have time for one more question? Last one. Okay, I'll be very, very quick. Thank you. Thank you, Adam. I really enjoy your talk. So I totally agree with you that anonymizing data could be a very effective means of addressing many problems that you told us. But I think there are also technologies that can de-anonymize the data. So what is your suggestion? Shall we regulate such technology? We could be very, quick.
Yeah, no, I actually don't know the answer to this. I think it's a great question. I think I think there is a certain level of regulations would be helpful. But whether or not there is to set a benchmark on what's the de-identification technique that could be employed, I actually don't know if it's even possible. But I've read so much about the fact that people can, with enough computing power, to de-identify anonymized data, makes people worried, and especially makes doctors very, very worried. The patient records that are being housed at a hospital or clinics, that sort of vast volume are all sensitive personal data. So to answer your question, I think some sort of guidance and regulations will be very helpful, but I just wouldn't know how to begin preparing or drafting such regulations, because the technology is advancing so quickly that we could barely catch up. So to do it effectively, it would require not just the effort of the regulators, but also the participation of industry experts.
So thank you. Because Adam had to leave at 6, so we changed the Q&A section just now. And now we move on to Aaron. So share with us opportunity and challenges in financial services.
Thank you. Yep. Just double click to move forward in the deck. Okay, well, let's see. Oh, there it is. Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah. It's a pleasure to be back at HKU. I studied at the Faculty of Law on Exchange many years ago, before this building, certainly. I did my PCLL here, and then I went on to qualify as a Hong Kong solicitor. At the time, I thought a life in the capital markets would be very exciting. Just a reminder that a legal career can be quite a winding road. I'm currently, I can go to the next slide, called Introduction. I'm currently HSBC's regional lead lawyer advising on data-related matters. And if it sounds broad, it is. I advise on data privacy, banking secrecy, data retention, data breaches, excuse me if I read, international data transfers, data ethics, any issue involving data, and now increasingly on a lot of projects involving artificial intelligence. I'm a member of HSBC's AI practice group, and I learn a lot about a lot of things, and in particular AI every day, and particularly today. I mean, I think this is a fantastic room, and I'm very pleased to be a part of it today. Thank you, Hao Chun, for inviting me to speak. Surrounded by this many knowledgeable people, I think the small contribution that I can make is to share my in-house experience within HSBC. Obviously a financial institution, some of the opportunities we're already deploying, some that we're looking at, and really the challenges in affecting proper governance over AI. Now, it won't surprise you that banks and other financial institutions have been using machine learning already for a long time now. HSBC started using machine learning models 10 years ago. And in October 2022 survey by the Bank of England and the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, showed that 72% of responding firms were already using machine learning or looking at using machine learning. And over the subsequent 3 years, up until October 2025, if my math is correct, that number was expected to increase by 3.5 times. And HSBC is certainly on that trajectory. We see opportunities in AI in three key areas and more, but three key areas: customer experience, operational efficiency, risk management, and compliance. So without further ado, let's have a look at some of the use cases for the financial services industry. For banks, people have been visiting our branches less and less, and COVID really only accelerated that trend. Customers prefer to do their banking online via browser or on their phone. I do it every day. This puts pressure on digital banking to be more user-friendly and efficient and more intelligent. And natural language processing, NLP, has certainly helped improve the experience that customers have had with these kinds of digital and remote interactions. And AI generally has increased the range of services that can be provided remotely, and sometimes these services can be provided instantaneously. I don't have many words on my slides. Chatbots are much better than they used to be. Surveys are now showing that for some kinds of requests, chatbots actually outperform humans in terms of satisfying customers. I'm sure you've all had bad experiences with human customer service staff, but NLP-driven chatbots with their very broad and encyclopedic knowledge of a business or an organization's services, procedures, et cetera, can help customers get the information they want faster. And even if a human team or an individual is required to help the customer, that chatbot can understand the question and find that team or person very effectively, accurately, and quickly. So NLP-driven chatbots are really doing a lot to improve the customer experience from that perspective. Another aspect of AI that's improving customer experience is voice recognition driven by AI. They are helping consign the phone directory tree. Press 0 to go back to the start. Thank you, goodbye, this kind of experience. Consign that to the dustbin of history. And I think future generations will look at the phone directory tree and just marvel that we ever had to endure it. It's quite amazing. So good riddance. Now, AI is also facilitating more reliable identity verification and transaction verification, which is so critical to digital and remote banking. Facial and voice recognition technologies are enabling remote onboarding processes, so you can sign up for a bank account or a new service without having to visit the branch, which is a good thing because there are fewer branches than there used to be. And AI enables the instantaneous or greatly accelerated provision of various services, including credit decisioning. Loans can now be obtained instantly in many cases based on analyzing statistical data or behavioral data relevant to the individual to assess default risk, which is of course relevant to a loan. And insurance premiums can also be calculated in real time or ahead of time. Good examples of this are travel insurance or even helper insurance. And streamlining the application process for these very actually useful services makes them more accessible to people and drives up the utilization, which in my view is probably a good thing. If you want something, you should be able to get it with the least amount of friction. Now, he looks intimidating, doesn't he? AI is helping banks and large trading houses make trading decisions. It's estimated that 80% of trading volume in the United States equity markets is algorithmic. So if you're day trading, watch out, you're not trading against other traders. And for the individual investor, AI is used to automate and streamline portfolio management. Robo-advisors, this is a friendly robo-advisor on the screen. They create and manage portfolios according to customer needs and risk tolerances, and they improve asset allocation level risk management, and they help protect individuals against their own shortcomings and self-destructive behavior like overtrading and the classic buying high and selling low, or my personal favorite, buying low and selling lower. That's that always gets me. Now, FIs are also using AI to automate repetitive tasks and really seek out business efficiencies and even to weed out human error. HSBC, as an example, is using artificial intelligence to assess ATM cash withdrawal patterns, and once they understand those, to optimize the delivery schedules to those ATMs. So a small example, but there are many examples like this. And further, AI is enabling FIs, and this is more important, to master internal information and knowledge assets that they have. We've developed an internal AI-powered chatbot that helps employees to ask policy-related questions. Now, this sounds like a very niche, kind of silly use case, but I once worked in an organization, and I won't name it, that had 7,000 internal policies. So I cannot overstate how useful this is for a large organization to be able to better master and explain what their own policy environment is. Not HSBC, and we're very streamlined. Now, yes, this slide shows an HKMA, thank you HKMA, visualization of a money laundering mule account network. AI is excellent at analyzing transaction activity across a lot of accounts, a lot of transactions, and detecting patterns which are indicative of financial crimes like money laundering. AI is helping to automate KYC, AML, and counter-terrorist financing processes to detect and flag unique or anomalous activity or behaviors, and to reduce the number of false flags or false alerts that our FCR systems are popping up. MasterCard recently shared that its anti-fraud models had led to a 40% increase in the accuracy of fraud detection, with a 50% reduction in false positives and a 50% reduction in the chance that your vacation might be ruined when your card gets shut off at a restaurant overseas. So obviously, the use cases for combating financial crime, there are so many, I can't really get into detail about this, but suffice it to say, it's a massive use case for the financial services industry. There's a vast array of existing and potential use cases for AI in the financial services industry. Here are some. Some of the future opportunities we see are expanding the use of AI-powered digital agents, voice-enabled digital assistants. So you can call the bank, and the fellow we saw a couple slides back will actually provide you more and more complex and in-depth service than currently you're able to receive from a robot. Also to develop more advanced analytics and insights to identify trends and improve decision-making. And a third area we're really looking at is to develop new products and services to better serve our customers, because believe it or not, retail banks are extraordinarily customer-focused. We invest in partnerships and collaborations with firms like Google, like Microsoft, like IBM, also with research and academic institutions like HKUST, and also monetary authorities and government bodies. So it really looks like the possible uses for AI, the use cases, are only limited by the amount of problems that we have or situations we can improve. But the other limiting factor, I guess, I predict, I know, is legal restrictions and ethical considerations as well, which brings me to some of the challenges that banks are facing and others with AI. I think it was said in another presentation today that AI had reached an inflection point, at least in public awareness. It certainly has. And I think this has prompted lawmakers and regulators to act. And according to the OECD, some of these statistics are really challenging. Governments in 69 countries have published national strategies on AI. There's something like 800 policy initiatives as well. HSBC operates in 62 countries, so I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a challenge to keep track of everything. But also to take all of that development and embed it into a meaningful, effective global governance framework for AI is something that remains a work in progress and something that you have to constantly revisit. Also, the cross-sector and broad impact of AI disturbs our very nicely arranged vertical risk silos. In the financial services industry, we like to break all of our risks, assign an owner to them, and then manage them up in silos that report right to the top. What's the risk today? It's risk 39. artificial intelligence seems to cut into a lot of these risk silos. And so that certainly throws not a spanner in the works, but creates the need for some flexibility, creativity, and broad organizational awareness, certainly in our risk management function, so that everyone is aware of the AI risk and how it might be relevant to their silo that they look at. Further, and this is if there are any regulators left in the room, I'm not calling anyone out. The fact that AI cuts across so many areas and is so broad means that we are going to be talking to more and more regulators about AI, more than one in a particular jurisdiction. So it's be very helpful if we talk to 4 regulators in Hong Kong about AI, that they at least agree what the expectations on a financial institution are. So that kind of particularly in-country regulatory alignment is very important. We don't want to be talking to Ada Chung from the PCPD and have her tell us something different than what the HKMA is telling us or the insurance authority. So that kind of in-country alignment is actually really important for us. Another unusual challenge that we're facing, maybe it's an opportunity, is trying to contain the internal enthusiasm of our own staff for artificial intelligence. I mean, there are blossoms of AI activity talks from all over the bank happening all over the world. Now, that's great, but it kind of makes it hard to govern all of that activity. So what we need to do and what organizations need to do is to maybe tamp down that enthusiasm enough so that you have the governance, but to do so in a way where you actually still enable and not discourage innovation, which is obviously really key. Now, just a word on how HSBC is governing AI, and it's a developing picture. In 2019, we were one of the first banks to share our HSBC, our principles for ethical use of data and AI. And the purpose or the effect of this document is actually, it's been a very powerful alignment tool for us to develop our AI use cases, as well as our governance efforts around the bank. So having a statement of these principles is very useful. Oh, thank you. Good. And we have an innovation pipeline extending from proof of concept to production and all the way through the development of an AI project. We have controls that are levered and looking at a particular AI use case. And instead of developing new controls, we've integrated the AI questions and the AI risk assessment with existing controls, because banks have very complicated risk management frameworks. And we found it actually helpful to leverage the experience we have with managing these other risks. And of course, eventually, if there's a particular material AI use case, this can be escalated up to a group AI review committee, and then eventually to Noel Quinn, who's our group CEO potentially. So having those escalation pathways is really important. And certainly AI is important enough to be a top of the house discussion. Now, a quick word on awareness, education, and training before I finish my brief talk. Organizations deploying AI will need to understand, have an awareness of AI develop within the organization the way privacy awareness has developed over the past 20 years. Frontline staff will need to understand it. Senior management, of course, to make decisions will need to understand AI. Fortunately, pop culture and science fiction, maybe not Adam's science fiction yet, has well-prepared people to understand the significance of AI and how it affects all of our daily lives or could affect society and maybe our species. So getting buy-in isn't a problem, but making sure people are educated and aware is really critical. So we have internal training, we have internal degrees and certification programs set up, and we're also fostering champions of AI so that whenever a business or function needs to understand or know about AI, there's going to be someone close to them that can keep them updated and aware. And finally, so I don't overrun too much here with apologies, Grace, a word for young lawyers, youngish lawyers, and even law school faculty that are here. Data privacy and other data laws like those that will emerge around AI should not be viewed as a niche area. I tell you, I work in a legal function with over 100 commercial lawyers just in Hong Kong, and the lawyers that do not understand the basics of data laws or cannot identify basic data issues, they are at a real disadvantage now when trying to advise their business. Every project or deal involves data issues or involves some innovative use of information technology. And there are many layers now that, well, always, but this is a base layer of the knowledge that goes into being a good lawyer. And after all, so much of what we do in the world today, our activities are happening in the data medium. So I would say that this is actually a fantastic time to be a data lawyer, and I'm really privileged to be one. So thank you.
So thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
Can I imagine AI technology already applied to HSBC in so many aspects? I cannot wait to open account in HSBC. Okay, so let us move on to Julia. So she would like to share the AI governance program. Welcome.
Thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me here today. Thanks, Aaron, for sharing. I didn't know that HSBC operates across 62 jurisdictions. 62. And that internal enthusiasm for AI rings so true across so many business organizations. That brings us to the important topic of how can we effectively govern AI? How can we build an AI governance program that can future-proof against all these regulatory landscape changes and technology changes? And especially speaking from an industry that is not as highly regulated as the others, and we're not a tech developer. For those of us in this space, where do we even begin? And I think a lot of us are actually in this space. What I'm about to say will not be prescriptive because I think each organization has different metrics for measuring success. So everybody's program is going to look differently. That being said, I do think there are some common elements that are actionable and practical that you should consider incorporating. The first one is to form an AI task force. I think early on today, we understand the importance of having interdisciplinary discourse. And within it, or that organization, that is going to be very important as well. In this task force, I think the obvious candidates would be your privacy team, your cyber team, your tech team, your IP lawyers, your LNC team, basically. However, take a step back and think about other business units what do they think about your organization's use of AI? For instance, what about your comms team? What is the story that they want to tell? What is the headline that they dread to see? And in terms of liability, like earlier on, Aaron mentioned, liability is a big issue. What would your insurance team recommend in facing increase in coverage? And your audit team, we mentioned how important auditability is. What would your audit team think about the use of AI in your organization? Are there any existing controls that can be leveraged to create some guardrails? What about your project management office? What role can they play? Can they help track any kind of strategic rollout across the entire organization? And your procurement team, which is so important for your contract approval process and vendor onboarding, what role can they play again in this whole process? Can they help to make some kind of recommendations on what solutions is preferred over the other? Essentially, the purpose is to get buy-in from all of the relevant business units in order to have a successful implementation of whatever governance program you come up with, and have everybody around the table to talk about their concerns with the use of AI in your organization. It is also a good chance to have everybody sit down and conduct a SWOT analysis. SWOT standing for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The reason is because AI is such a buzzword. Everybody's very excited about it and also anxious about it. But a lot of times, I think those of us in some other spaces don't even know what they want to do with AI. So this is a great chance for this organization to sit down and identify the way that use cases can be developed and deployed. Next is to develop agreement on what you mean by AI. I think early on someone asked questions about different definitions of AI across different jurisdictions. This rings true as well for within an organization. I think outside of academia, outside of subject matter experts, laymen understand AI very differently, and there are varying degrees of knowledge and understanding of what is AI. I think usually people associate with ChatGPT, generative AI, some recommendation algorithms, but we all know it's such a broad umbrella term. So this task force that you gather is going to agree on what types of AI you are going to address. And without that definition, you can't go on to define all the other elements in your program. Next is to align on a set of AI principles. I think this is important because what we are trying to do with this governance program is put in writing some set of written, set in stone rules governing something that's constantly changing. So these AI principles that you come up with has to be consistently followed as use cases develop. And you should think about how that align with your organization's values and principles. So this team, this task force is going to think about what are the benefits and interests and how these set of principles further drive your organization's values. So with the terminology and the principles, then you can start to develop your policies and SOPs. Again, there's no prescriptive or exhaustive list of what they could be. It could range from your risk management framework to defining a risk matrix and what are the factors that could affect your risk tolerance decisions. It could cover consumer-facing applications, workplace applications, and third-party accountability. For instance, how do you vet a vendor? What is a list of acceptable vendors? Defining the acceptable use cases, even going further to specifics such as what prompts you can or cannot use, what keywords and what data types or data sets that can or cannot leave your company's environment. And the list goes on. And you can take this opportunity to think about your existing data governance practices and policies and see how you can leverage and expand upon those. The bottom line is these documentations, these policies and SOPs should commit to explainability, transparency, and documentation. And it would be worthwhile to mention how often audits will occur and who is responsible for oversight and monitoring. Another important element is AI training. I think Aaron briefly touched on that as well. This is really crucial because, again, outside of this AI task force, your business units, oftentimes the business units that wants to use the AI does not fully understand what is AI. They had a very nice sales pitch from the vendor and that's it. They don't know what goes in there, what's the impact, what's the risks and the limitations of that. So you need to educate them, essentially increase AI literacy across the entire organization. That would help with implementing whatever SOPs or policies that you've come up with, and that ultimately ensures accountability. Another core element is AI inventory. I think you can draw a parallel with data privacy. You cannot govern what you don't know. So you do need to have this inventory to have an insight as to overall deployment of AI across the entire organization. Multiple benefits with this inventory, which is that you can identify all the negative risk factors. It helps with your documentation. It helps with incident response. And it is often easier said than done to compile this AI inventory because it's a living, breathing document. Somebody needs to constantly maintain and update it. And as with data privacy, data inventory, the most obvious task to do could be the most challenging one, which is to find out what data flows in there, where the data sits, for what purpose being used, and for how long it's being retained. Like I mentioned, AI audits and cadence. This can be any kind of regular periodic review, or it could be depending on the volume and impact of this technology that's being used. Ultimately, this audit should be testing for the fairness of the algorithms, and it should be able to monitor the answers to questions such as what are the benefits of this technology, what's the risk, and who is potentially harmed by this technology. It helps to demonstrate the responsibility in the practices as well as justifying the outcomes for using this AI. Another important element, in my opinion, is building an incident response plan. We all here know today that there are certain common pitfalls with using AI, including security issues, privacy violations, biased outcomes, lack of transparency, and accountability. You probably already have an existing data incident response plan, but you may want to think about whether you want to have a named individual responsible for defining what is an AI incident, what policies apply in case an incident occurs, who should be notified, who should do the notifying, at what stages, and who can call a stop to the productions and operations at that time. To wrap it up, I just want to quickly bring up the New York AI hiring law, just because this is independent of industries, is in the employment context. There are certain legal requirements set down in this law that is giving us some food for thought as to what are the core elements that we should include, some of which are AI impact assessment and AI inventory. And the responsibility, worth pointing out, is that it's on the entity that deploys the technology. And if there's any one takeaway for those of us in the space where we're not a tech developer, we're not as highly regulated as other industries, and there's no really framework, as we hear today, is a very fragmented regulatory landscape out there. If you don't know where to start by gathering as inclusive as possible a team so that you can get people to start talking and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. So it proves again, what is needed is not a pause in AI development, but governance. Thank you again. So let us move on to Ms. Wu. Ms. Wu will share with us practice and reflection on personal information protection in generative AI.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to join today's meeting. I will discuss the challenges that generative AI poses to personal data protection. As a technology company, we are continually seeking effective ways to ensure the protection of personal information. But before we talk about it, it's important to note that our practice are primarily based on Chinese law, which may differ in terms of definitions and rulers from other regions and countries. I will aim to present using universal concepts and norms as much as possible, but there will be some concepts that are specific in Chinese law. Okay. Firstly, we need to understand the algorithmic principles of generative AI to better comprehend how generative AI processes personal information. The generative AI we are discussing today actually stems from the transformer architecture. Please take a look at the picture. Okay. The essence of the transformer is to decode the text, into a kind of abstract parameters, often referred to as token. These tokens established an understanding of language through weights and biases during generation tasks, such as with GPT-3. It learns by remembering which words usually come next, like filling in the blanks. When you give it a word, it keeps doing this, guessing and building until it makes a whole sentence. So basically, it's like an AI playing a guessing game with words until it writes something that makes sense. Once we understand the algorithmic principles of generative AI models, we can see that the difference between generative AI models and past AI models is that they are not just models, but should be seen as the model and a compressed dataset of knowledge. The tokens within the model actually store all the text from the training in a mathematical form, including personal information contained in the text. Because of this, we can't really point to a part of the model and say, this is where it knows about time or theory, or usually pull out a piece of what is learned. That makes it tricky when we think about the rights of personal information, such as accessing, correcting, or removing, because the model isn't holding onto all the data in a simple way. Once we understand how these generation models work, we naturally started to think about how we can protect our personal information while training and using. Let me briefly introduce AnJie's practice. AnJie is committed to use technology to protect user privacy. So we have put together a system called IABC for privacy engineering. Privacy engineering is a solution that implements the concepts of privacy by design and privacy by default. From a technical perspective, integrates privacy considerations into the practice of system and software engineering lifecycle processes. The I means the privacy level insight. The A means privacy impact assessment. The C means the privacy risk control. And the B means the personal information book. It ensures that privacy protection requirements are effectively implemented and enforced. So, how do we protect personal information in generation AI with privacy engineering? We break down the process into 4 key stages: data collection, model training, model deployment, and model application. The most crucial step during the data collection is identifying the source of the training data. We need to know whether it comes from public sources or non-public. Generally speaking, the latter means a higher risk. Next, in the model training, we scan the dataset for personally identifiable information, also known as PII, identifying the personal information. We will remove, replace, or using synthetic data once the data that has been screening and processed in this way only is used for training. Thirdly, since we can't guarantee 100% in screening and processing, it's essential to have evaluation and output control technology in place when the model is deployed after training. Evaluations can detect if the model generates personal information, maybe actual or fictitious. And based on these findings, we can further train the model to reinforce the understanding that generation personal information is a mistake and should not be avoided. Sorry. Finally, in AI applications, AI need to access accurate user information to provide the service. For example, just like the financial, when we ask AI to analyze over financial and over financial planning advice, we use technologies like RAG. It means retrieval augmented generation to balance the service benefits against risks to personal information. RAG was designed to address the AI hallucinations by providing information through a knowledge base or retrieval system. The AI will understand the human requests, perform search based on them, then analyze and present the search results to humans. However, we have discovered that such an approach is also invaluable for protecting personal information. We keep the engineering of AI training and usage separate and ensure they are strictly isolated. When using AI, RAG to query personal information and generate the content users need. But during AI training, the information retrieved by RAG is not included. In our practice with generative AI, we strive through privacy engineering to ensure that AI is trained only on knowledge. When identifying PII in generative AI, it's important to discuss the protection and use of personal information included in public data. Because public sources like open source data sets and internet data are the main resources for generative AI. The personal information in public data is complex. A name could be belong to a historical figure, a celebrity, or an ordinary person. Accurately identify them is almost impossible. Beyond common personal details, public data can also contain sensitive information like financial accounts, ID numbers, and health information. This may be due to unintentional sharing by users or sharing beyond their intended scope. Generative AI can then capture and amplify these risks by learning this information. So we believe that it's necessary to identify and assess the risk of personal information contained in public data. Data that could significantly personal rights, such as the ID numbers, financial account, and health information should be identified and handled in advance. For common person information like names that have a low impact on personal rights but are costly to identify, post hoc remedies may be more feasible and economical. Just like the search engine collect information from a public website. There are some ways to provide relief. For example, removing the context information from the training dataset and using output control technology to prevent the generated content. The second issue that needs to be addressed in generative AI is the rights of personal information. As we have discussed the principles of generative AI, it's important to understand the different stages of its operation. When personal information is still present in the dataset, it is possible to query, to character, or remove. However, once the information has been used in the training, there are currently no effective ways to search, character, or remove. The only option would be to retrain the model with a new dataset that has the correct information to train a new generative AI. But this is very, very, very expensive. However, our understanding of generative AI is still quite limited. CTO of AnJie Group, yes, our CTO, Dr. He Zhenyu, had seen that the imagined intelligence of generative AI is like primitive people seeing fire for the first time. We can see the fire and know it was value, but we don't fully understand how it comes into being. 哦，sorry，怎么往前？没关系。Sorry. Another important issue to consider is whether input data used by generative AI necessarily constitutes personal information. In my personal view, if user input is not associated from individuals, it should no longer be considered personal information, as considering it could significantly impact the development of generative AI. Another good practice is allow users to opt out the use of input, balancing the technical development, business interests, and user rights. Okay, finally, well, let's make a brief summary. Generative AI is a new and promising field. It is necessary to consider both the reasonable use of data and the protection of personal information. When using public data for generative AI, we need to spot and evaluate personal data for potential privacy risks. For low-risk information, we might consider remedies like those search engines use for taking information down after the fact. As generative AI technology is still being in the early stages of development, we should be cautious with non-public personal data. Managing AI training and usage through controls within the engineering pipeline could be one approach. It is advisable to encourage the disassociation of input information used for training from personal identifiers. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wu. So I know that processing management is quite popular in China, probably especially for some internet companies nowadays. So I'm impressed that processing AnJie already has many processing in place, even for the AI applications. Thank you again. Okay, so the last panelist is Dora, and she will share with us the topics of cross-border data flow and control in Agile AI.
Thank you, Sunny. I'm Dora. I am a partner of Deacons, a law firm in Hong Kong. And first of all, I would like to thank Hong Kong, you in particular, Professor Sun, for inviting us to share our experience in some of these data issues, in particular concerning AI, in this distinguished conference forum. So the topic that I'm going to discuss is actually about cross-border data flow and control in the age of artificial intelligence. Now, after a day of a lot of information from our distinguished panelists, I'm sure that you know a lot about regulations, all the controls or regulatory approaches, and how companies are coping or handling these regulatory side of issues. So in my session, I'm not going to burden you some more with these regulations, but instead, from my perspective and from the experience we have in my work, we are seeing that actually cross-border data flow is a very important element or phase in whether it's development of the AI technology or the use or delivering of services by adopting AI. And because of these international trade activities, we are seeing a lot of clients that have issues concerning globally how they're going to handle all the competing data privacy regulatory compliances around the world. Now, we heard from some of our panelists that perhaps they don't prefer a unified framework for regulating AI. And personally, yes, I don't prefer a unified framework. But under this state of flux, so I believe it's worthwhile to explore some interim measures to practically facilitate data flow in order to make sure that we have a sustainable and stable AI development. Now, and particularly because we know that AI is highly data-driven from some of the businesses or scenarios that we see. Say just for example, some cross-border online shopping platforms, or even some cross-border membership schemes, or even in the automotive industry, a lot of these motor vehicles, they now have AI to help drivers, to assist drivers with the driving experience. And in particular, in all these circumstances and scenarios, we are seeing a lot of personal data being captured. Now, but on the other hand, we have different regulatory regimes. We are seeing that some regulatory regimes, they tend to focus on more heavily on compliance, but whereas on the other hand, on the other side of the world, that perhaps there may be some giving out some flexibility for the businesses at arm's length to discuss and to see how they would want to arrange their privacy protection scheme when AI is concerned. Now, say for example, in China, now we're seeing that if you have this data, cross-border data needs, then perhaps you have to think about your strategy and to see whether it's really required from your business perspective. There's a need to go through the security assessment, or whether there is a recordal requirement, or also that could be like you can go through certification at some stage to satisfy the compliance requirements. But whereas on the other parts of the world, that perhaps there's not such type of assessment requirements. But one thing in common, we see that in the business context, data transfer contracts is actually very important to a lot of businesses. But then when we speak to some of the companies and businesses, it seems that they're not paying too much attention about these data transfer arrangements, the contractual obligations. Now, very helpfully, some of the regulators around the world, they have provided some standard contracts for businesses to adopt. As you may know, in some of the jurisdictions, the contracts, the standard contracts are regulatory focused. It's mainly about what the data transferor and the data transferees legal obligations in handling cross-border data transfer in the region and outside the region. Now, in those circumstances, what we encounter or seeing some questions or difficulties in businesses is that they seem to not having an awareness that even at the contractual commercial level, they also need to think about issues such as data portability. For example, what if the data retention period has ended? Then what about the obligations of the data transferee? The recipient has over those products, and what should the parties do? And we are seeing a lot of miscommunication or lack of education in this area, and that's why when in actual scenario, we take a lot of time to help businesses to become aware of these issues and patch the gaps. Now, I think in a scenario that where, say, for example, an overseas data transferee, they have to work with some other parties, whether to have a new program, and that's why they have to forward the personal data they obtained from the upstream data transfer onward. And therefore, they have this contractual commercial considerations to harmonize. We are also seeing some situations where the data transfer, the overseas data transfer itself has to harmonize with their, say, for example, statutory obligations at home. The common issues are, for example, whistleblowing, or the duties to report to certain authorities because they are listed companies or because of some of the identities or the importance in the society. Now, these are the issues that really need to harmonize, but at the contractual level, perhaps we need to think about how businesses are going to flow down or distribute their obligations and liabilities to parties that also have a say or have some chance to use the data. Say, for example, in the context which I just mentioned about commercial cooperation, I being a overseas data transferee, I have the data and then I pass on to you and then you help me to do some sub-processing, or we jointly develop a program using the AI. Then in those situations, so are we, as I am contracted, for example, with my upstream data transfer, or I have some obligations to him, to my upstream data transfer, then am I slowing down enough these obligations or passing on enough these liabilities onto my partners or even the sub-processors? Now, this leads to another question of how good do you know your partners, your sub-processors? So we have come across situation where, say, for example, I have some data, I want to engage an AI or a technology company to help me to create something or to process something or even to partner with me to do something. So when we negotiate on the business behalf and we try to understand more about how the other side is controlling, overseeing the data, and the response is not very to us is not encouraging or desirable, because we are hearing feedbacks that perhaps they don't even have a way to control, or they even have a way to oversee how data are being processed, in case they also use sub-processors. Now, these are undesirable situations. I would really suggest that businesses should really have a look. Do you know your vendors checks before you partner with someone? And of course, we are hearing that a lot of the more established platforms, they are developing AI responsibly, but then actually AI developers around the world, there can be large platforms, there can be small platforms, but the gist is to do some planning and know your partners. Now, in terms of cross-border data transfer and the privacy concerns, I think it's an ongoing effort to be compliant, meaning that, as Julia said, mentioned just now, that we need to have some strategy in monitoring. We have a committee or an infrastructure there to understand the issues and to discuss the issues. And in particular, in my experience, staff training is actually a very important thing, because from staff training, or even when we have a chance to speak to some frontline staff or even the technicians who are working on the AI modeling, then we come to understand that there is a gap between understanding, say, for example, some very basic privacy concepts such as necessity. Now, why do I mention necessities? Because we are seeing a trend that there are quite a bit of regulatory inquiries about the necessity, say, for example, for collecting personal data, and on the other hand, also the necessity for transferring data out of certain jurisdictions. Now, so I totally agree that with more open discussions within an organization, and of course training generally to the public will enhance the privacy protection awareness, in particular on this necessity issue. Now, the third thing I wish to just share with everyone is sometimes a lot of the businesses, they know they want to use AI because that is perhaps a quick way to help them expand business or to generate more business. Now, I think a lot of the time, perhaps businesses may not have thought about any backup plan. So say, for example, at the time when they collect some personal data from their upstream data transfer, at that time, it's legal, it's compliant. But what if, as and when they develop this AI model using this all these personal information, all of a sudden, perhaps they receive a message from the regulator telling you that I'm sorry, the transfer, the cross-border data transfer, the use of data is no longer compliant. So we are hearing that there perhaps some indexing strategies, some de-identification strategies to help us to take away some of the personal data outside of this and the deployment of AI. But in fact, when we have a discussion with the technicians, to our surprise, actually, in a lot of occasions, scenarios is actually not easy or very costly, or even it's impossible to totally purge the personal data just by like taking away something. As we also heard just now, even if we take away something, that perhaps some other technologies helping re-identifying the persons in a way that would also lead to some kind of breach of the privacy regulations. Now, I think businesses really have to think about the backup plans. Say in some of the scenarios we come across, would there be alternatives to sourcing data from different sources, or would it be possible to adjust some interfaces or the AI learning model in order to enable the AI surface to be compliant with these privacy regulations? Now, I'm aware that I'm running out of time. So to sum up, I think as some of the speakers mentioned this morning, I would say privacy by design is not just something for protecting personal information. It's also important to the development of AI, in that it will make sure that, say, for example, the cross-border data flow of personal information to be stable and sustainable in order to fuel and support our AI initiatives and developments going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Thank you, Dora. So as you probably know that in China, there are 3 major personal information cross-border transfer approach. That is risk assessment is approval-based, different with GDPR. And then standard contract, ICC, standard contract clause is a filing based. And the other one is certification. That's also a little bit different with GDPR. So apparently, after hearing Dora's sharing, and this issue will become more complicated in the age of AI. Okay, so given we are running on time, I will just skip my question and leave it to, the floor. And then Adam decided to stay with us. So if you have question to Adam, he can still answer. Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Behzad. I'm a business consultant, and my question go directly to HSBC. And from a banking perspective, what are the key considerations and challenges in adopting digital assets or cryptocurrencies within the existing regulatory and compliance framework? And how do you see the role of data and AI governance intersecting with these considerations? In a wake of so many licenses, 3 licenses issued in Hong Kong for cryptocurrency and a digital asset, they just directly go to Aaron. Thank you.
So let us select the question first. We have only 2 left, sorry. And you still have question to the panelists and you can reach out them after. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi. Sorry. Chris Woodhead, Cathay Pacific. Just a question for the panelists, mostly from industry side. I think one of the issues that we've seen is that the definition of AI is quite variable, and that's set across different regulators. I'd be interested from the panel just to understand how your organizations have internally defined AI. And one of the other items that, as a follow-on sort of part 2 of that question, is that when you define AI and you've got that, how do you escalate it according to your committee standard? Is there a tiering of AI, for example, a chatbot versus other types of AI applications? Thank you.
Sorry, can I leave the question to the audience who never raised it in the last round?
Nobody else?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
You're
Okay.
lucky.
Oh, all right, fine. Sorry, first, my question is just to Julia. Very good presentation. You mentioned the AI audit, and you talked about the inventory collection and management issues. But what about filtering and removal of applications or data that or sunset provisions?
Aaron?
The first question.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to your question, unfortunately. We have a team that does digital assets. Sorry. Okay. I don't know the answer to your question. We have a team that does digital assets, and I think it was current digital currencies. And I have to say there is going to be an intersection with machine learning AI in some sense, but I haven't seen it. So I just can't answer your question. Thank you, though.
So who would like to answer the second question? And a volunteer? If no volunteer, I will just select randomly. Adam, given you decided to stay with us.
I think there was a 2-part question, right? Like, so how will we define? In my industry, well, I wouldn't say necessarily my company, but at least in Hong Kong, healthcare, we're not in biotech, we're in healthcare. Clinical healthcare, artificial intelligence, it's quite blurry in terms of definition. So it's basically, machines learning from experience. So we do not have a definitive artificial intelligence definition. We should, though, I do agree. I think the second question is how do you bring about and then sort of diffuse that sort of definition to the rest of the organizations? I think that answer the questions. It's a challenge. It's a challenge because personally, as a privacy officer, unless you're Microsoft or Meta of the world, chances are you're probably the lone voice in the boardroom. So yes, you do have your IT folks, you do have your business development, but chances are you will be the only person in a bustling boardroom, fighting against the odds. So to talk about both the innovation and balancing the risk, it's not something, at least in healthcare, it's not something that it's commonly done. And doctors, for lack of a better word, are not necessarily the most innovative people. So I guess, it's not to poke fun at, our particular industry, but I always feel like as a privacy officer in healthcare, it's like playing defense in football. You have your teammates who are trying to score goals, but you're the only person who's trying to avoid leaking ones. So, we have very little understanding of what AI could do to healthcare, and let alone understanding who we are playing against. So if you're playing against Manchester United, then you don't have to worry about it because they can't score. But if you're playing against a very formidable AI adversary, so then you're up against something that you might not have any idea. Unfortunately, we're playing against the latter, not Manchester United. And so the answer is we don't have a set rule, not in my industry.
Thank you. So last question goes to Julia.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. I think what you mentioned about, I think it's related to data retention more. I think it's very important element as well. I think it ties back to the existing data retention schedules that you have and your data governance practices in your organization. I think it's one core element, but it really ties back to whatever structure that you have in place and to expand upon that or leverage upon that. I think some of the weak links would be data leakages, right? And then another weak link would be what data is ingested by the algorithm that you want to employ. So yeah, it goes back to what kind of data practices you have within your organization.
Okay, so thank you. At the beginning, I asked a question, what kind of chemical reaction will happen for traditional industry? So now it sounds like compared with a high-tech company, it's more magic. Okay, so thanks for sharing. I think about a little bit this morning how to close the last panel. So I would like to say today, the machine has the intelligence already, but they don't have consciousness compared with human being. But I believe in the future they will have. So at that time, we'll face more challenges. So hopefully we still have opportunity to regroup and discuss the challenges in the future. Thank you.